Okay, welcome everyone. As you heard from the infamous disclaimer from our lovely Soon Ziri voice, this will be recorded session, so we can have it made available to all of those who were unable to attend, or for those who want to kind of look back to it later. But welcome to the Polsky Center's info session on science-based programs related to both venture capital and entrepreneurship. We're excited to have you here today and look forward to diving into a range of resources we have available through the Polsky Center. Joining us on today's call, we have some current students and some alumni who have taken part in these programs. I encourage you all to toss questions in the chat as we go through, or we'll have a dedicated Q&A portion at the end where you're also welcome to toss any questions that you might have into the chat, and we will do our best to answer all of those, or put them to the appropriate student or alum to provide their personal perspective. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. My name is Nora Mansfield. I'm Assistant Director with the Polsky Center, overseeing venture capital programs and the George Shultz Innovation Fund, and I'm joined by my colleague Ellen Zetkowski. I'll let her give a quick intro to herself before we dive into the material.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. Like Nora mentioned, my name is Ellen Zatkowski, and I am a Senior Program Manager at the Polsky Center, where I focus on a lot of our programming for the scientific community.
Thanks, Ellen. So to kick things off, we wanted to outline a common student profile. These are observations that we've had in having a lot of one-on-one conversations with incoming students and students who have taken part in these programs. And we, Ellen and myself and everyone at the Polsky Center, are always available to you to help you figure out the right path for you during your time at the University of Chicago. But as it relates to the programs and various resources that we're going to review this afternoon, we just wanted to highlight kind of a common profile of the students that we often see. So some of these lines might resonate with you, but oftentimes students will come to us saying, I'm really interested in science-based ventures, or I love geeking out and staying up to date on trends in technology and innovation. I'm considering pursuing a career in venture capital, or I'd really love to join a science-based startup. I'm interested in energy, healthcare, life sciences, etc. If any of these resonate with you, you are in the right place. This info session is going to go over all of the resources available to you by way of programs, coursework, and internships. So as we say at the Polsky Center, we have a wealth of resources, and we know sometimes it's a little bit difficult to navigate from the outside, but that's why Ellen and myself are here, and that's why we encourage you to connect with, your peers, students who have been a part of these programs, or alumni who have gone through them previously, because there's no one right path, but we're all here to help you. So for those of you who are joining today's session, I would imagine that you are interested in kind of the STEM landscape and looking for opportunities in science and technology that are offered through the Polsky Center and your respective academic programs. So today we're going to kind of break it down into a couple different verticals to help you make sense of what's out there and figure out the right path for your particular areas of interest. So we're first going to go through an overview of some of the programs offered through the Polsky Center. Following that, we'll give a little bit of a synopsis of some of the coursework that might be of interest or that we often suggest for students who are pursuing these programs. And we'll close out with an overview of a couple internship opportunities that we find to be really helpful for those who are pursuing this path. So before we dive into everything, I'd love to offer the opportunity for our current students and alumni who have taken part in these programs previously to introduce themselves. So I'll play our introductory Zoom Vanna White and kind of take us through the alums and students we have on the call. And when I say your name, I welcome you to come off mute, share your name, the degree program, and either the year you graduated or your anticipated graduation year. And if you wouldn't mind highlighting some of the Polsky programs, coursework, and internships you took part in, we'll dive into those in more detail a little bit later, but we welcome you to kind of share that laundry list with us to contextualize that for our students on the call. So I'd like to start with one of our alumni. Corey Ritter is a Booth alum who now works with Arch Venture Partners and took part in I would imagine almost all of the programs that you saw in that flow chart on the last slide. So Corey, I welcome you to come off mute and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Nora. Hey everybody, I'm Corey Ritter. I work at Arch Venture Partners, graduated from the MBA program in 2018. Let's see, Polsky programs. So I did Startup Summer, the Collaboratorium, I-Corps twice, VC Lab internship with OCA Ventures, the New Venture Challenge with an Argonne National Lab Company, IFA, interned at Arch, did the VCIC thing my first year, was a co-chair at EDC, TA for CI, and was aiming for the participation trophy. So I think that worked out. But happy to talk about any of those. And I think I took all the classes that had the word VC or entrepreneurship or something like that in them. So yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Corey. We're also joined by another Booth alumna, Ritika Bardwaj, also working with Arch Venture Partners, and I welcome her to come off mute and provide a similar introduction.
Thank you, Nora. I'm Ritika Bardwaj, and I tried to copy Corey really well here. So I did I-Corps twice, did IFA, PEVC lab with Arch, and then I did lab to launch as well and was a TA for CI, and then did the New Venture Challenge by trying to form a company with one of my classmates in the opioid addiction space. And I graduated Booth just this July.
Congratulations. So now we're going to transition to some of our current students. Rachel Wallace, would you mind going first?
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. I'm currently a fourth-year PhD student in molecular engineering, specifically in the immunoengineering space within that. And my research is very translational, so I'm really interested in the next step in taking science out into the public and specifically in the biotech and pharma space, getting it to patients. So with that interest, I took the Intro to VC class, one of the cross-campus classes that's available, and learned a lot. And then wanted to take that information I learned on market analysis and how VCs look at these new technology companies. And I, this past spring, was a Sci Fellow in the first pilot cohort that they did there, and that was a really great experience to get to apply some of the things that I've learned in that class. And then I'm also currently enrolled in the Entrepreneurship for Science and Medicine, the other cross-campus class, to learn even more. So happy to answer any questions about any of that later in the session.
Thank you, Rachel. I'll now toss it over to Joe Gammy.
Thanks, Nora. I'm Joe Gammy. My background's in mechanical engineering and energy systems at Georgia Tech prior to Booth. I'm in the class of 2021 full-time program. In relation to Polsky programs, like a lot of the other folks you heard, I'm the current Innovation Fund Associate. I did the EIP Entrepreneurship Internship Program over the summer with a innovation-funded company, SwitchSource, which does energy hardware work. And then in terms of the Booth classes, I've done entrepreneur discovery, lab to launch, commercializing innovation. I'm currently in EFPE, and then did the PEVC lab in the spring and late winter with a family office here in Chicago.
Thank you, Joe. Guy will bring you up next.
Thanks, Nora. Hi guys, my name is Guy Caland. I'm a second-year student at Booth, and the ways I've been involved with Polsky include Startup Summer, which was right before the MBA started. I did 2 versions of the I-Corps program as well, and then currently an IFA member, similar to Joe, and I took PEVC Lab last year too.
Awesome, thank you, Guy. And Ken, last but not least, we'll have you introduce yourself.
Great, thanks, Nora. My name is Ken Onishi. I'm a 6-year PhD student in hopefully my final year in psychology's integrative neuroscience program. And my research looks at how the gut microbiota influences behavior. In terms of the events I've been involved with at Polsky, like many of the other people up here, I took Entrepreneurship for Science and Medicine a couple years ago with Robert Altman. I also did a My Choice internship through BSD, looking at how osteomyelitis can be alleviated quite sooner with a startup and their technology. And in addition to that, did the introduction to venture capital with Scott Meadow this past year. And currently, along with Joe and Guy, I'm a current Innovation Fund Associate.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you to all of you for joining us for this session today. We find that it's helpful for us to share about these resources, but connecting the dots based on student and alumni experience tends to be the best way for current students to kind of figure out the right path for them. So we're first going to dive into some of our programs that are available. As you'll note from all of these introductions, there is a lot of overlap in kind of the programs, coursework, and pathways that these students and alumni have all taken, but we'll break it down category by category to help you all figure out what are the right opportunities for you. So I'd like to first dive into this program comparison. There are a few programs offered through the Polsky Center that focus on the science-based innovation pathway and provide opportunity for students across the University of Chicago to support research commercializing out of the university. I'll let Ellen walk us through the I-Corps and Sci Fellows program, but feel free to kind of peruse this grid here. We'll be highlighting the timeline, kind of weekly hour commitment, focus of program, skills that you'll likely gain, and unique benefits of each of these programs before we go into the programs in more depth and allow, again, our students and alumni on the call to offer a little bit of additional context on their experiences. Ellen, do you want to quickly take us through I-Corps and Sci Fellows?
Sure, thanks, Nora. So we've also arranged this chart in the pathway that a lot of our technologies go through our Polsky programming. So that might be a helpful way to think about some of the differences between these programs as well. So for example, I-Corps is often the first program that a lot of teams who are interested in commercialization will pursue through the Polsky Center. We offer it every quarter, and it is composed of 7 weeks, each of those quarters. I'll talk a little bit later about the National Science Foundation component to I-Corps, but in terms of the student experience, students are usually working with teams of faculty or staff researchers, sometimes postdocs. We have had teams led by PhD students and MBA students, but I would say given the focus of I-Corps, our students tend to support PIs or other faculty and staff who are bringing their technologies through I-Corps. And one of the primary ways that teams work with the faculty is through helping them with customer discovery. So really helping them explore potential market applications for their work and really diving into one particular customer segment during I-Corps. Sci Fellows is the next step for some of the teams that go through I-Corps if they're really interested in pursuing the startup route. So the Sci Fellows program can be thought of as a 5-week consulting project where teams are assigned a technology coming out of a U Chicago research lab and spending time really analyzing that technology and what the next steps would be for it to launch as a startup and what that go-to-market strategy might look like. And so again, we'll talk in a little bit more detail about what that looks like, and Rachel will share her perspective. But I'll pass it over to Nora for the IFA piece.
Ellen. So the IFA, as Ellen mentioned, this grid lists things kind of in the progression in which the technologies and researchers will bring their innovations through Polsky Center resources. The Innovation Fund Associates program is an opportunity where these researchers are able to apply with their ventures to the Innovation Fund to seek investment and incubate with fund resources over a 10-week period. At the same time, we have Innovation Fund Associates who serve as venture associates, actively doing diligence on these deals, helping us understand kind of the all of the ins and outs of the venture, put together their own analysis of it and an investment recommendation. And this is probably the most lengthy of these commitments in that it is a full calendar year commitment of students who serve as Innovation Fund Associates. So we'll go ahead now and go into a bit more detail and offer the opportunity for some of the alums of these programs to share about their experiences starting first with I-Corps.
Great. So as I mentioned, I-Corps is funded through the National Science Foundation. So UChicago is the only university in Chicago that offers I-Corps, but there are programs around the country. And like I mentioned, it's really kind of that first step to researchers who are looking to commercialize discoveries or technologies coming out of their labs. So since it is a quarterly program, we are full for the fall. We're up and running with our first session this Friday, but our next cohort will be for the winter quarter. And so the deadline for teams is November 27th with the info session on November 17th, which we can share info about on how to register. One event that will be in the winter quarter that is often a way for students to connect with teams going through I-Corps is the Collaboratorium, which Corey mentioned, and I'll have him speak about in a second. But the Collaboratorium is a great way for you to see scientists pitch their ideas that they're hoping to bring through the program and potentially join their team to help with the customer discovery process, interviewing potential customers, learning more about their industry or customer segment that they're exploring through the program. And so in terms of what we look for in student involvement is that you have at the most basic level an interest in commercializing research coming out of the university, and that you're really looking to join a team and collaborate in that way. But I will turn it over to one of our alum. Maybe Corey, if you could speak to the Collaboratorium, that would be helpful first, and kind of your experience both in that program and then I-Corps subsequently.
Sure, yeah. So I was new at Booth, heard there was an event where scientists talk about what they're doing and ask for people who are interested in business to help them out. And so I went to it, and there's a therapeutics company there talking about what they were working on in food allergies. It was super interesting. Talked to a bunch of other groups there as well, and found out the therapeutics company was starting I-Corps in the fall session. So I joined their team to help out with that. And I-Corps is a really great program where these scientific teams go out and talk to real people to try to find out if their technology has a legitimate application in the real world and scope out various applications. And it's a pretty intensive process where you're interviewing 50 or so different stakeholders, so investors, users of the technology, technical experts, people in industry. And that was a great process, and it really was the thing that got me most interested in, well, how do people look at these projects and determine, is this a good idea to start a company out of or not? And got to work directly with a top tier researcher at University of Chicago. And so that was excellent.
Thanks, Corey. Guy, I know that you recently went through I-Corps. Can you share a little bit about what that experience was like and what specific role you had on your team?
Yeah, definitely. So I helped a professor at the computer science department with a startup called Net Microscope. And this was back in last fall, but it was around, how do we change the way that network monitoring and analytics are conducted for internet service providers? And that sounded very foreign to me when I first started. And I think that the real value add was that I was able to be a business development lead for them and really understand who should their customers be and what value add were they going to provide. And so, the benefit I got from it was learning about this new technology and understanding how, internet service providers and network monitoring works today, while I was doing a lot of customer research for them.
Thank you. And actually, that's a great way to transition to Sci Fellows, because Net Microscope also went through this program, and the Sci Fellows were assessing that technology. So the Sci Fellows program is a way for students who are interested in learning more about early de-risking and business development activities for very early stage startups to really get exposure to that work. And it does start with a 5-week consulting project, which we will hold in the fall and spring quarters. And part of that project, by the end of the 5 weeks, is that teams will make a recommendation about whether that technology and startups should move forward into our Compass Accelerator, which is a deep tech accelerator the Polsky Center just launched. So Net Microscope was one of those teams that went through I-Corps, went through the Sci Fellows program, and now is in the Compass Accelerator. So it's a great example of that pipeline that we're trying to develop. So like I mentioned, you would have the experience to evaluate a very early stage technology, assessing the risk of what might go into launching that technology as a startup. And then there's the possibility to continue working with those startups after the 5 weeks and following them into the accelerator. Since this is a new program, that's something that we're still working out some of the details, but that will be an opportunity as part of the Sci Fellows program in future. And so in terms of what we're looking for with students, we're interested in students who are able to kind of juggle multiple projects and deliverables, as well as having that very specific interest in working with startups coming out of the university. But I did not participate in the spring quarter. Rachel did. So I'm going to have her speak to maybe, Rachel, which technology you assessed and kind of what that evaluation process was like. And now that you're on the other side of the 5 weeks, kind of what you felt like you got out of that experience.
Yeah, so I was assigned a technology developed by a professor in the molecular engineering department that could detect single molecules at a very high sensitivity in a high throughput manner. And they wanted to utilize this technology that they had developed to develop a diagnostic test for sepsis patients. So monitoring different immune cytokine levels at a very sensitive way to predict patient outcomes better. And I was really excited about this technology. It aligns really well with my scientific interests, and it was a good experience to dive deep into a new technology. But then I also got experience in a lot of other aspects of evaluating this technology for an actual business. So there was other difficulties in adapting this technology for sepsis, whether there was a need. I learned a lot about market analysis, and we did some initial customer discovery, reaching out to different physicians, and getting a lot of input that way. We were in pairs of 2 on our teams. So I was paired with an MBA student. So I think our skill sets balanced really well, whereas I kind of could fully dive into the technology and explain some things to her if she didn't, if she had any questions, and she had much more experience in terms of financial and market analysis. So it was really great to learn from her. It was nice that it was 5 weeks and the deadlines were weekly. So we stayed involved in analyzing the technology, but it wasn't drawn out too much, which is great considering I'm also trying to do a PhD. Yeah, we got to work with a real technology, and we had guidance from different mentors that we met with every week to make sure we were on the right track. And in the end, we were able to present our recommendation, and it was a really great experience, and I learned a lot, and I would recommend it to anybody who is interested in trying to apply some of these different analytical methods to a real technology.
Thank you, Rachel. I will pass it over to Nora now to talk a little bit more about IFA.
Thank you. So the Innovation Fund Associates program is a learn by doing VC apprenticeship that provides students with an opportunity to perform due diligence on live deals, which the deals are all researchers commercializing their innovations out of the University of Chicago and our affiliated labs, Argonne National Laboratory, Fermi, and the Marine Biological Laboratory. As mentioned previously, this is kind of the most extensive of the commitments in this suite of resources, and that IFA in any given cohort will be asked to commit a full calendar year. So we are currently recruiting for the next cohort of IFAs. Application deadline is coming up on October 13th at 10 a.m. And those who are accepted to the program will begin their cycle as Innovation Fund Associates starting with a thorough training session and series of training sessions in the winter quarter, followed by 2 active deal cycles. The first being the spring quarter of 2021. The summer is yours to pursue any other internships or other, extracurricular commitments that you'd like before returning for your final investment cycle in the fall quarter. IFAs through this program get really thorough training on science-based venture due diligence, as it differs quite a bit from that of, diligencing consumer targets. And we know that in these teams, because it is offered as a cross-disciplinary program, the deal teams that IFAs are assigned to similarly reflect the cross-disciplinary nature. So there will always be, on any given deal team, at least 1 or 2 students from Booth MBA program. You'll have 1 or 2, science students from various master's and PhD programs across campus. There is likely to be 1 law student who kind of helps approach the legalities of the deal, the IP, et cetera. And then an assortment of students from Harris School of Public Policy, the college, and other master's programs. But through this program, all IFAs and the full deal team get an experience of complete deal evaluation, an opportunity to provide an investment recommendation to the advisory committee of the Innovation Fund, and as such, the opportunity to pitch and defend their investment recommendation to this board. Members of this board are either serial entrepreneurs themselves, venture investors, or kind of industry experts in the space. And we're looking for those who have an interest in kind of the research commercialization process and the entrepreneurial process, and an eagerness to learn about science commercialization and, really be assigned to what might be a foreign technology at the beginning, but provide a commitment to the process to learn the nuances of the technology to which you're assigned, and within a 10-week period, surprisingly enough, be able to, speak at least base level industry expert conversations, having done really thorough due diligence and speaking to, various other targets in the space and other industry experts. So I'd first like to pass this off to Ritika, who's now kind of working in the space on the investing side with Arch Venture Partners, to see how did the IFA program inspire you to pursue this path professionally, and now working in the venture landscape yourself, how would you credit the IFA program to preparing you for your role at Arch?
Thank you, Nora. I would say that, IFA helped me with 3 aspects, right? So it helped me understand the early investing landscape and how to work in the team and really look at the technology and spend that 10 weeks with a interdisciplinary team. So it gave me that skill. At the same time, it also allowed me to look at these technologies early on, right? They are pre-seed, or kind of a gap investing in before the researcher is ready to take that step. So it's a very different landscape, and it teaches you skills that are complementary to if you decide to go either in the venture space, or if you decide to go into the startup space. I think those were the 3 important aspects. And even if you're not interested specifically going into the venture space, I think what it teaches you is how, as someone who wants to start a company, how you should be thinking about your company and how you should be working with your potential investors to shape your company. So, those were the 3 things. And now in my current role, I feel like I've been using those skills to think about, how do you approach an entrepreneur? What kind of questions to ask that entrepreneur? What kind of questions do you guide them to, kind of rethink and, and kind of reevaluate their current proposal and present it in a different manner? So it's helped me learn those skills to apply them currently in terms of my interactions with the entrepreneurs, and also doing my own due diligence and working for the deal.
Thank you. And I know within this program, oftentimes, the students that we have applying from other degree programs across the university outside of Booth might be a bit intimidated by kind of the VC apprenticeship aspect, for fear that, they don't have the same frameworks from the Booth curriculum related to due diligence, to market mapping and landscaping, et cetera. So I'd welcome Ken to maybe contribute. Ken, as a non-Booth student, how has it been helpful to be assigned to a cross-disciplinary deal team? And how have you brought your area of academic expertise to the table to support and elevate your team's success in the due diligence process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to reiterate, the really diverse team that you're working with JDs, MDs, MBAs, and PhDs, really allows you to see how different people approach the exact same problem in an almost learning by osmosis. By being around super smart people, you can see that like, oh wow, like, I think I'm smart in like one field of psychology, but like seeing how everyone else contributes their own perspectives has just been wonderful. So in terms of like, I've always been interested in business, which is why I applied for IFA to begin with. And so seeing that, like applying what I had learned in my readings from the classes I had taken, both in the Introduction to Venture Capitalism and the entrepreneurship of Science and Medicine, we can really take those tools and those frameworks that we learned in classes and apply that to a startup. And really thinking about the teamwork was really, really fantastic. Thinking about like a PhD's perspective going into IFA, I think at times we can really contribute our analytical skills that we kind of take for granted on the everyday, thinking about how in contrast I changed as a first year PhD compared to now entering my final year. The incremental changes of analytical skills were so slow and always being bashed by reviewers and other professors in a very healthy way intellectually, has really, really changed my perspective, stepping outside of academia in IFA to be like, oh wow, maybe I actually learned something during this PhD. Maybe it wasn't a complete waste of time. And seeing that these analytical skills can really be applied in so many different domains, not just in this small sector of science, but really scaling that to, if someone says some type of statement in business, really what we're trained in our PhDs to ask why, and why. And so up until we can get to the point that, okay, this answer will suffice for now. And so I think one of the skills that I brought, last quarter, we had Guy and I were on a team looking at a quantum computing company, which like before the cycle started, it was like, what even is quantum computing? And so it was wonderful to go go on the deep end and really learn as much about this as possible. And I actually learned a lot from Guy, learning about how to look at market applications and how to actually quantify where we can take this technology and move it and where it might be profitable in the future. And so again, really learning by osmosis, by being around super smart people has just really, really like engaged me in a way that I think in some ways science, we can get a little bit repetitive in what we're doing on the day-to-day. And this really allowed me to step outside my comfort zone and see where what we learned in a PhD can be applied elsewhere.
Great, thank you. And Joe, I'd be curious from your perspective as a Booth student, what it's been like to, work alongside students from the law school and various PhD and postdoc programs. What have you learned that's kind of offset the Booth frameworks? You've been assigned to some pretty difficult technologies. So what has that process been like to be assigned to a technology and have to learn from your teammates and through the due diligence process to really immerse yourself in the deal?
Yeah, thanks, Nora. I think one of the biggest things I'm thankful for the IFA program is the ability to kind of get out of the Booth bubble sometimes and work with super smart PhDs, MDs, even undergrads from the college. And the intelligence and what those folks bring to the table cannot be understated. There is no, hey, I'm the Booth guy, I'm gonna work on the business side. Hey, I'm the science guy, I'm gonna go work on, understanding the chemistry or something like that. Everybody contributes a lot more in different areas than they anticipate going into it. And that learning experience and that well-rounded experience as a team really helps to grow your education, whether it be in the college or in Booth, in ways that you didn't necessarily anticipate. So when you jump into commercializing a quantum dot technology like we did last quarter, or I guess in spring quarter, you don't really know where to start, and you all work together to divide up who's going to tackle what do we know already, and what do we need to find out moving forward, and use some of those Booth frameworks that you learned from Professor Kaplan or Professor Meadow to help to point the ship in the right direction, and then come up with a game plan to figure out what we think about this as an investment. And so I think that if you talk to Corey or Redika or anybody that has been working in venture for a while, it's a kind of it's a trade that you learn through repetition. And so having these repetitions in a lower risk environment in a very real way is a great way to kind of learn if venture capital and entrepreneurship and deep tech is for you, as well as to gain some experience that I think a lot of the venture capital firms and investing firms that I've talked to really value from Booth students or PhD students that they may be looking to recruit.
Thanks so much, Joe. So very quickly, we'll just go through an overview of a couple of the student groups across campus that we've worked with. By no means is this an exhaustive list that includes all of them. We encourage you to explore, based on your degree program, what opportunities are out there. But to just name a few, for non-Booth students, we have worked quite closely with the UCBA program, My Choice, and a few others. So for those of you who are in various master's and PhD programs, with an interest in this landscape, I'd encourage you to reach out to some of your peers who are part of those programs and see if they have suggestions of others to explore. On the Booth side of things, I'd certainly encourage you to explore EVC, Built at Booth, the healthcare group, and a few others. Again, this is by no means a completely comprehensive list. There is any number of them that could be an info session in and of itself, but we have often had collaborations with a few of those groups across these programs. So for coursework, we'll go ahead and go through an overview of the Booth offerings and just broader UChicago offerings, and we'll go through these a little bit more quickly. So the below offerings listed here are available to MBA students through the Chicago Booth program. Commercializing innovation is offered in the fall and spring. That is one that's taught by Professor Scott Meadow, and we have Lab to Launch offered in the winter, which is taught by Keith Crandell with Arch Venture Partners and Professor Jason Blumberg. Commercializing innovation is an overview of an opportunity to learn the frameworks of deal sourcing, analysis, market evaluation, financial modeling, and due diligence. That's a long list because it's a pretty intensive course, but anyone who makes their way through CI is bound to come out with an incredible toolkit of resources to apply either, on the operational end of a startup or within the investing landscape. Beyond that, we have the Lab to Launch course, which is a newer course to the Booth offerings that is a deep dive into lab-based innovation, providing a tool set for commercializing discoveries, and a really fantastic opportunity to do so in partnership with Keith Crandell of Arch Venture Partners, given that that is their specialty, and being at such a research-rich institution. So I'd first like to ask, perhaps Corey, given your work with Arch, and I know your work with the Lab to Launch course, if you have any anecdotes that you'd like to share related to that course, or perhaps additional information that might be helpful for students who are interested in exploring it further.
Yeah, it's an application-based course. Anybody who's interested in how do you take something out of the lab and turn it into a company or something that has real-world impact, I'd encourage you to apply. The PhD students that might be on the call, we're going to put out a notice here shortly recruiting venture fellows is what we call them. They're essentially group members, and so there's an interdisciplinary group similar to IFA with MBA students, some folks from the law school, public policy, and and then one PhD student. And each group starts with a half dozen technologies that we source from all around the country, a lot of top institutions. And then you select one to build an initial business plan out of. And half the class is energy focused and half the class is life science focused.
Thank you, Corey. And would one of our booth students, perhaps Guy, do you have any light to shed on commercializing innovation, or Joe, any suggestions for students who are considering that course?
Yeah, maybe I'll defer to Joe on this one because I am still planning to take commercializing innovation, but I've heard great things.
Okay, wonderful. Joe, do you want to share a little bit about the course?
Yeah, Nora, I'd be happy to. So first on Lab to Launch, Corey, I've taken both Lab to Launch and CI. On the Lab to Launch side, I echo Corey's sentiment. And also, if you're interested in commercializing any type of lab-based tech outside of energy and life sciences, I would definitely recommend it because a lot of the energy-based institutions that Professor Blumberg and Crandell source innovation from have tangentially related technologies like material science and things like that you may find interesting. So I'm welcome to talk to anybody about that. And then secondly, on commercializing innovation, to your point, Nora, there is no shortage of perspective that you leave after spending the quarter with Scott Meadow. And it's a great, foundation for understanding how to evaluate and think through venture investments, as well as building companies, evaluating markets, and the tools that are at your disposal, and how to think through deals of all types of manners. So I highly recommend it. It's a good bit of work, but that work is has a lot of reward at the end of it. So it's definitely recommended.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and move on then to cross-campus offerings. I'll have Ellen elaborate a little bit on entrepreneurship for science and medicine and intro to venture capital.
Great, thanks, Nora. So the cross-campus course offerings are really intended for those audiences at the university who wouldn't otherwise have access to entrepreneurship coursework at Booth in particular. So these are not open to Booth students. I just want to kind of make a note about that and have transparency in that. So these are primarily geared towards graduate students in the sciences as well as faculty and staff. Like this fall in Entrepreneurship for Science and Medicine, we actually have a good number of staff researchers from Argonne National Lab. So it's really a way for us to work with folks across the university ecosystem who are really interested in learning more about the intersection between science and business and entrepreneurship. So we do hold Entrepreneurship for Science and Medicine in the fall and spring quarters. Like Ken mentioned, it's taught by Robert or Bob Altman, who is one of our entrepreneurs in residence at the Polsky Center. And then Intro to Venture Capital is taught by Scott Meadow in the winter quarter. And so this is a great way to really gain that foundational understanding of how science and business intersect and what opportunities might be out there. I know a lot of the PhD students who are in this fall quarters course are really thinking about, if they're not going into academia, what might be out there in terms of career opportunities. And that is one of the reasons they're taking the course. It is a great way, like you've seen, to access other Polsky programming and really gain an understanding of what that might entail, and just connecting with individuals across the university who have similar interests that you might not interact with otherwise. So we are holding these classes virtually, and we'll continue to do so as long as we're doing virtual programming. They are non-credit, they're free, and they're through the Polsky Center. So it's a great resource for individuals who are interested. I know we have a few people on this call who have taken, I think, both of these courses, which is great. I know that I think Sid is on the call, who's a current IFA. If you are still here, Sid,
Yep.
Could you share a little bit about your experience in Intro to VC?
Sure, yeah, so my name's Sid. I'm a second-year medical student, actually on the same team as Guy and Ken right now for IFA. Last year, I took the Intro to VC class with Dr. Meadow, or Professor Meadow. Pretty great experience. So I think from my background, what I was looking for was, I'm in medicine, but I'm also pretty interested in research, and particularly like AI, health AI stuff. So I was trying to get an idea of kind of the frameworks you take a look at just to see in the future, if I was to come across something that I thought could potentially be commercialized, that'd be something I would love to pursue. So I thought that class kind of gave a good contextual framework for, especially for people who are pretty heavily interested in research. The class seemed to be geared more towards obviously people not in booth and not in kind of the business world, generally speaking. So it really focused on, you know, when you have this idea, how do you look at the idea? How do you start thinking about, is this idea that is something to be potentially commercialized? And then the frameworks and kind of the process that you have to go through to go kind of do that. And I thought my favorite part about the class was Professor Mehta would always give these sort of examples from his past experiences where he talk about some company and talk about why this specific idea he was trying to illustrate was relevant to this company. And that sort of context I thought was a lot better than most other classes I've taken that are sort of more just theoretical. It kind of gives you the idea of like how this idea actually applies to a new venture or a new platform that you might evaluate in the future. So I thought it was pretty relevant to kind of what I was doing, what I was interested in. And I think if anyone's sort of in that same space, it's a great sort of framework.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then Ken or Rachel, I'll defer to who wants to speak to entrepreneurship for science and medicine, maybe what motivated you to take the course. And I know Rachel, you're currently in the course, but speaking to kind of what you both have gotten out of it. No, defer to whoever wants to speak.
Yeah, I can go ahead and touch base first. Similar to what Sid had mentioned about the intro to venture capitalism with Scott Meadow, I was interested in taking actually some of the technologies from our lab and looking at circadian rhythms and scaling that into something profitable in the future. And I really didn't have any ideas on how that was even possible. And it really wasn't until I learned about the Polsky Center just a couple years ago, like 2 years into my PhD, where I saw that there were classes that I was just looking for a framework for how to even approach this. And so it was wonderful having that class to have people who have had their own startups come in and talking about their experience and how they've taken the tech from their labs and scaling that into something, into a company. And so I think it was really about the intersection of taking the technologies and the learnings from our research and trying to bring that to a wider audience. And I remember like one of the realizations during grad school was, since I'm in circadian rhythms research, I was interested in looking at how people, what the interest was in circadian rhythms research. So you can look at like Google Trends. And then so when the Nobel Prize for science and medicine went to circadian rhythms a couple years ago, I was expecting like a huge blip there on Google Trends, but it was actually quite small compared to something earlier that I just searched that month. And I saw that the size of the blip for a Shark Tank episode that had to do with circadian rhythms was about like 20 times the size of that of the Nobel Prize going to circadian rhythms. And so really wanting to think about like how we can reach people with our science to hopefully have a more informed and healthy society was really, really helpful for the entrepreneurship of science and medicine.
Fabulous. And just in the interest of time, I think, Rachel, if we get any questions, I'll pass them over to you in the Q&A section. But I know we still have to cover internships and we want to make sure we get to any other questions. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat as well, and we can answer them as we're going through the final section on internships.
Wonderful. So for internships, for Booth students, we have a program that I'm sure you've heard of from, informationals with some of your peers or perhaps in your search in selecting Booth. The PEVC Lab is an opportunity where the Polsky Center facilitates a matching process. Students apply to the lab denoting various details about their prior professional experience, areas of interest, and the investment stage of preference. Similarly, host firms will apply to the lab, providing criteria of what sorts of skills they're looking for in an intern, perhaps prior professional experience, etc. And we provide resume sets based on the matching of that data and send it on to the firms. At that point, the firms will screen and hire interns that are of the right match and kind of align with their needs. there are a handful of firms within this program that kind of overlap with the STEM entrepreneurship-based opportunities. And one of those is Arch Venture Partners. So I'd love to pass it on to Corey to share a little bit more about Arch's experience with the PEVC lab and perhaps just about your internship opportunities at large, and how, you know, these sorts of programs might help prepare candidates to apply for Arch.
Thanks, Nora. I'll just start with a quick background what Arch is. So we started as the Argonne Chicago Development Corporation in the mid-'80s, actually, in the business school. There was a dean at the business school that recruited a bunch of students to kind of wander the halls, talk to researchers and say, hey, we should probably patent that, and we should license it to this company, or we should start a new startup company. There really was no mechanism to do that at U Chicago previously. They had some success with startups, so they spun out as a private venture capital group at the end of the '80s, spread out across North America. Now it's a global firm. We're investing out of our 10th fund, which has grown a lot in size lately. It's a $1.5 billion fund. Arch historically has been focused across the physical and life sciences and some IT. We're now much more focused in the life sciences. We helped co-found Illumina in the 90s, a bunch of top therapeutics companies that are really pushing the state of science and medicine. And then recently companies like Grail and Twist that are sort of transformative companies. That's the shameless self-promotion part of my pitch. Most of what we do is start new companies. So we'll look at raw science at a university. Sometimes we're in licensing multiple pieces of IP from different locations. We'll start the company, hire the management, recruit other investors to invest in a Series A deal with us. We stay involved in the company all the way through exit. And we've had 30 IPOs in the last 6 years. That's the end of the shameless self-promotion part. For interns, we're looking for folks with science background and interest primarily. You know, I think we get a lot of interest from folks that are just want to do VC and they're not sure what type of content. I think we've had success with interns who are just interested in science and the commercialization of it and don't even know what VC is. We can kind of teach you that part of it. Physical science folks are welcome. Life science is more our focus lately, but I have a physics background and, you know, I just ask Ritika a lot of questions and do okay. And then we're looking for interns who are willing to read the papers and patents and dig into the literature and be the dumbest person in the room a lot. We have MBA students, we have PhD students that are interns, and we can work with PhD students and their PI, you know, it might be like a day a week kind of thing. Rolling enrollment as interns, and, you know, we're looking to meet people now. So if you're interested, Ritika will put her email in the chat here. Please feel free to reach out and let us know. And then we try to bring people on in the winter quarter for the VC lab. We've had MBA students stick around for the summer, stick around for their second year as well. That's what I did. And like any venture internship, there's no guarantee of any type of job or anything like that at Arch. However, we have helped people get jobs in other venture firms and in kind of top tier startups and things like that. And so we try to do that. You know, it's a great opportunity. I got a lot out of it and then got a chance to stick around, which is great. You know, I'll just say, parting, like all these programs that Polsky have are incredible. I had none of this kind of stuff on my resume previously, and then I just did all those things. And that helped a lot when I first met Arch and talked to them. And it helped me tremendously as an intern to be successful as well. So I'd encourage folks that are interested to participate as heavily as you can. Thanks.
Yeah, Corey, that tees me up to my next question. I think you and Ritika, you know, both experienced almost all of the programs and coursework that we outlined in today's session. And I'm sure that helped prepare you for, you know, your current roles with Arch and the other internships and extracurriculars you had during your booth experience. I know, you know, one of the common themes is kind of trying to figure out what resources are best and, you know, kind of trying to map out the right path for any particular student. Would you advise, you know, a similar path and just trying to soak up as much as you can during your Booth or UChicago experience? Are there particular programs or courses that really stand out to you that you'd suggest at minimum prepare students on this call today to pursue a path similar to your and Ritika's? Would be curious to know, you know, if you had to narrow it down to just a couple, what you might suggest. And don't worry, we won't be offended if you choose favorites.
Ritika, do you want to go first there?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that definitely it's hard to pick a favorite baby, but I would say IFA was really, really important for me to learn all the skills. However, I would definitely make a pitch for iCorp because I came into the program saying, I think I want to do startups, I want to do entrepreneurship, and I will be great at it. And my first quarter when I did it, and I had to do 50 interviews, I realized how much work it was, and there was no structure, and it, you know, it seemed very rosy in a movie, but it's very different in person. So I think that was a very important piece that made me kind of realize which way I wanted to go. So I would say both those programs were really, really important for me. And in terms of coursework, I would definitely say the PEVC lab is a great resource and a great way to go about it. And if you have no prior, you know, experience in commercializing innovations, I would definitely go for lab to launch in terms of being able to learn how to work in a team and get that experience, because a lot of times when you do diligence, you'll be working in a team, and this teaches you that cross-disciplinary, you know, skills that you would need.
Thank you.
So you can do two things outside of taking 3 or 4 classes and still get Bs in your MBA classes pretty easily. I had one quarter where I shoved all my classes to 2 days, and I interned at OCA Ventures 3 full-time days a week plus a day on the weekend. And so I got the most personally out of actually doing stuff. The classes are good. Don't skip negotiations. That's maybe one that's not on the top of your list is entrepreneurship classes, but that one's super important, in my opinion, looking back at it now. Great thing about IFA is, you know, if you're a talented, interested amateur, you can actually have a real impact and help. And the best way to do IFA is to be more like a consulting team that renders an investment decision down the line. And so you can really get close and work with these entrepreneurs, scientific founders trying to put these companies together. And then the second cool thing about IFA is it's real. So there's actually real money, and you're expected to render a real decision, not a theoretical class paper or even a consulting opinion. It's, you say, yes, we should put money behind this thing, and it's real money. So that's the other really cool thing about it. I think, you know, if you're interested in the venture world, personally, I think you should also be dual tracking the startup world, and get as close to the entrepreneurs and startups doing those things as possible. And it helps with your sanity if you're happy with either outcome. As an early career venture person, I'm still happy with either outcome. So you could, you know, check my LinkedIn profile in a couple of years and see if I'm still hanging on or not. Yeah, I would just say get out and do as much of this stuff as you can, because it's all really great.
Well, thank you both. And being conscious of time, for those of you who need to jump, we welcome you to do so. Ellen and I are happy to stay on the line and answer any additional questions you may have. To the alumni and students who joined us today, thank you so much for sharing about your experiences. I think each of them is a testament to the fact that, you know, there is such a wide range of resources available through the Polsky Center and broader UChicago ecosystem. And there isn't one right path that can get you to the end goal that you might have for your personal endeavors and careers. So we are here to help you figure out what programs are right for you, and to help you kind of map out your UChicago experience. If there are any questions, we welcome you to toss them in the chat. For any of the students and alumni who need to jump, we welcome you to do so. And thank you again for all of your time. All right, so looking through the chat, there were a couple questions about participation in both the IFA and PEVC lab program. I'd like to address that by saying that, you know, for students who are interested in doing both, that's certainly possible. The IFA program, possible, and I see Joe laugh, possible, but depends on your sanity. The IFA program, it can be considered an internship for entry into the lab. So you can end it at that and be able to register for the course in the spring quarter. If you're hoping to source an additional internship opportunity through the lab program, you are certainly welcome to do both. I would say that is a bit contingent onto your tolerance, your bandwidth, and your need for sleep. We have had some students who have done an external internship on top of an active investment cycle, and that's a lot of work. An IFA investment cycle, you can expect to have to commit between 15 and 20 hours a week, and that will fluctuate dependent on the nature of your deal. There have been times where, you know, in the race to the finish line for Innovation Fund Finals, a team is challenged to have to pivot or overcome some sort of hurdle in the due diligence process and is likely putting in a little bit more than 20 hours for a portion of time. So please note that. I'd suggest reaching out to some of your peers should you be interested in pursuing a balance of your own. What we are looking for in Innovation Fund candidates, and I think that this kind of overlaps both to Innovation Fund candidates, to pairing candidates with I-Corps teams, and similarly for Sci Fellows, is just a really earnest interest in this ecosystem, that you are passionate about the sciences, you're passionate in innovation, you are amenable to being assigned to a venture that might be life sciences related, might be of energy focus, might be biotech, and to dedicate yourself to the process, immerse yourself in the technology, and whether it is your you know, industry vertical that you are most passionate about or one that you're kind of interested in and would love to learn more, you still put forth the same energy and passion to become a novice expert throughout the process. Roll up your sleeves and work hand in hand with these management teams to accelerate their success and to help guide them through the process. Each of these opportunities from a student perspective, I-Corps, IFA, and Sci Fellows, all are dual track programs where you're working with researchers and the management teams of their venture to help move them forward in their process, and in a consulting capacity, helping you know, shed light on some potential hiccups that they might see in their commercialization pathway, to help map out their best go-to-market strategy and to move them forward in the best way possible. So we're just looking for candidates across all of these programs that are passionate about the space, are willing to roll up their sleeves and put in the work, and are excited to do so. There were a couple questions as to whether these programs are exclusive to just current students or offered to alumni as well. I see Ellen mentioned in the chat that alumni are able to partake in the I-Corps program, which is in fact you know, part of the eligibility criteria. Unfortunately, for the Sci Fellows program and IFA program, those are limited to current student status. There was an earlier question as well related to course credit. Unfortunately, neither of those three programs, I-Corps, Sci Fellows, or IFA, are tied to course credit unless you are using the IFA program as your entry into the PEVC lab. They do provide Sci Fellows and IFA a small monetary compensation, which we encourage you to explore on our website and through the application process for those. It appears as though we have gone through all of the questions in the chat and we're a few minutes over on time. So thank you all again. We're going to follow up with an email that summarizes these resources, the various subsequent info sessions, program specific, application links for those who are currently recruiting. And I'm sure, you know, you're welcome to reach out to some of the students on the call to learn a little bit more about their experiences as well. I see some nodding heads, so I'm not volunteering them as tribute completely. For those of you who want to toss your email in the chat, you're welcome to. And again, Ellen and I are here to answer any questions that you may have. So you're welcome to respond off of our follow-up email with any specific questions and schedule time to discuss further. So thank you again, everyone. We appreciate your time and we hope to see some of you apply to these programs.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.